engineer with Public Works, and so she has a little bit of an update for you guys too. So I will call the meeting to order at 2:03. We've determined that there's a quorum. If there's any public comment, and I don't see any, no public comments. And then if you had a chance to look at the minute meetings from our last meeting of June 2nd, if there's any changes or discussion. If not, we will go ahead and approve those. Seeing none, we'll approve them. And then for the staff report, item 4, we'll take item 4A and item 5 at the same time. They're both from the Parks Department. Parks can give us an update, and they're also requesting that we select one of our committee members to serve on the Parks and Recs Master Plan Steering Committee, which I think we talked about briefly last time, but Parks might have more information. I will turn it over to Susan. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here today. I'm Susan Andrade Wax. I'm the Library and Recreation Director for the City of San Rafael. Nice to meet all of you, even if it's virtual.
Hello.
Hello. So I'm just going to briefly talk about a couple of the projects, but the main project we're going to dive into a little bit more is the Park and Recreation Master Plan. So I know, being the Director of Library and Recreation, it can be a little misleading. Recreation in most cities can be in departments that have really unusual names. The traditional name is Park and Rec, but there are very few of them still around. In our city, it is Library and Recreation, and Parks Maintenance and Parks Development is coordinated under the Department of Public Works. We are kind of best cousins is the way to do it, or to state it. And so we work with them to make projects really come through and develop them, design them and things like that. So we'll get into a little bit more of that later. But basically, I just want to share with you a couple of key projects that I think would be of interest to you. The first one being, the city has applied for State of California Prop 68 grants for 2 projects. One is a competitive grant process, and that is for the renovation of the Pickleweed field over at the Pickleweed Park in the Canal area, as well as an enhancement of that park. So some additional enhancements, including shade structures and enhanced barbecue area. But the main part of that project is the renovation of the grass field and the conversion to a turf playing field. So it wouldn't require water and it could be playable all year round. Right now, that field is closed for 6 months of the year because of the type of use it gets. There's only one main field that we have in San Rafael. And so as you can imagine, that turf gets pretty beaten up once it's open in late spring, early summer. And it is closed usually in late fall, early winter, and it doesn't reopen for another 6 months, just so the grass literally will grow. By converting it to turf, there would never be a downtime unless there's lightning and thunder, and then you obviously have to close it, but rain would never be the reason for closing it. And obviously there will be more playability for a lot more people. So just a fun little factoid in case people ever ask you, if you take proper care of a turf field, it should last you about 10 years. And that's important because that is payback, that type of investment. The capital outlay of a turf field is significant, but the maintenance and water and all the expenses related to a regular grass field, the break-even point is about 10 years. So people often ask you if it's more expensive. It's about the same, but a turf field yields about 2.5 times the amount of use than a regular grass field because it's never basically off limits during inclement weather. Again, it's only, you don't want anyone out there if there's thunder and lightning, have people with cleats on, they tend to be metal. It's never a good thing. So just wanted to let you guys know a little bit about that. But the project I think you're probably most interested in would be, well, actually there's 2. One is we're working with April Miller and her team over in Public Works to make some significant ADA improvements at Albert Park Stadium. One is to create a ramp so people have access to the stadium. That stadium was built in 1950. ADA didn't happen for about 41 years later. So you can imagine the kind of help and assistance that stadium needs to bring it into compliance. So there is a ramp that is being spec'd out, as well as ADA gender neutral restrooms that will be also added. So there's a couple other things there that has nothing to do with ADA, but it has to do with safety, and that's increasing the height of the fencing around the stadium to protect not only errant balls going out into the roadways, but people who are watching kind of along the baselines on the first and third baseline. So all of those improvements really are about ADA compliance and safety. So they're all good things, but they are sure expensive. So that's one of the big projects. And April's on this phone call today, or on this conference call, so she can answer some questions if you have them of her later. The second project is we have applied for Prop 68 per capita grants. Now, I mentioned Prop 68 before through the state of California. That is the voter approved measure that happened in 2018. And there are two grants that we can apply for. One is the competitive grant, and that goes up to about $8 million. And that's for the Pickleweed Park conversion. But this other grant is a per capita grant, and we're guaranteed the amount of money of $177,000 and change. However, we still have to apply, and our application has to be accepted in order to receive that funding. There are a couple other criteria that go along with that. One is that if it is not for land acquisition, it has to be for park improvements. And when that park project is selected, the city is required to make any associated ADA improvements at that time. So after looking at a few projects that we have kind of in the queue, the project that was selected was a playground replacement project. There are 4 parks that were up for replacement. The park that was selected based on the dollar amount that would be required to match all the improvements was the Sun Valley Park. So the park application, actually, we just met today, and we're getting signatures on our grant application, and we will be submitting it shortly. If we receive it, we will receive $177,000 in change that will go towards the replacement of the playground structure, the playground surface material to make it ADA accessible, as well as a fence around that playground structure, and then all the ADA improvements to and from the playgrounds. So we have to take it right from where the parking is, or make parking available, go up the sidewalk, make sure there's no stairs, make sure the slopes are right. And you can imagine even that small little footprint of a park, it is pretty extensive. So that is the project that we are putting forward to the state of California, and hopefully we'll get approval. Once we get approval, and I'm pretty optimistic about that, once we get that, then we would find out what the timeline is. It looks like the project would have to be completed by, if I remember correctly, the end of December of 2023. In a perfect world, if we got approval, we would go forward with hiring a consultant to start the design on the playground and engage the community around that. That is a neighborhood park. So we would be looking at the neighborhood to provide feedback as to the types of equipment that could be selected for that playground replacement, as well as aesthetics. Again, that is a very tight park site. So between the budget and between the site constraints, that would be the criteria driving the decision that we'd be looking for feedback from the community on that. So that will be exciting. And again, if we have our ability to pick when we would do that, the best time to ever replace a playground is after Labor Day. As you can imagine, you don't want to pull out a playground in spring or summer when everybody really is needing to have their outdoor time and really enjoy a playground. So you kind of wait for all the kids mainly to go back in September, and then you would pull out that playground and start the replacement. I see that there's a question. Ashley, I don't know if it's of me or it's Dawn.
No, I just wanted to clarify, when you were talking about turf at Pickleweed, you're talking about artificial turf.
Correct.
Is there any environmental concerns about the subsurface going into the adjacent wetland?
So all of that will be considered, but we did submit an EIR with that project in regards to the conversion of it. So there's a couple other things that really are more of a concern than that. One would be if lights were going on and the impact of the lights on the bay, as well as actually the application of any pesticides and insecticides, which are not required for turf. But the surface, the subsurface of turf, which is often called the fill, most of the products that are being used now are not what was used 20 years ago, which is decomposed rubber, basically, recycled rubber. What is being used now are virgin materials or zeophils that are organic, and that is the type of material. So I'm not an engineer, so I probably can't answer all the questions that you have, but we'll be glad to get any of that information if we don't have it today for you. Okay. One thing to note, the pickleweed project is actually also being coordinated. There's several projects going on in that area. The restoration of the Tiscornia Marsh by the Audubon Society is underfoot right now, and they've applied for grant funds as well. And we've been working with them since day one to coordinate this project and make sure that they both are mutually beneficial to each other's projects. So that has been, actually, their project came a little bit before this last grant application process. The application and the desire to replace the grass field with what they call a turf field has been in one of the city council's highest priority projects for over 20 years. The Tiscornia Marsh project came to the city for their consideration and approval in regards to the site started in 2018, and I think we took it to council, if I'm not mistaken, in 2019. So we are working in coordination with them. So Sun Valley was the last project. We have a lot of other smaller projects, but knowing what this board and commission focus is, I thought you'd be interested in more of the ADA improvements.
And that might bring us to our item 5 with selecting a member to serve on your Park and Recs master plan. Did you want to talk a little bit about the master plan and its status?
Sure. I'd love to. So the Park and Recreation Master Plan, you probably were extremely involved or are very much aware of the city's general plan. The city's general plan obviously is very broad in its application. It considers all elements that the city really needs to take a look at over the next 20 years, all of its infrastructure improvements, et cetera. One of those elements is a park and recreation element. There's also cultural, which includes the library, et cetera. But as a subset, a city usually has a park and recreation master plan that is a comprehensive citywide look at the city's infrastructure and elements in reference to parks and recreation. So it will look at evaluating all the city's outdoor park facilities. It will evaluate the city's recreation programs. It will have a community engagement component to it, which is community workshops, as well as a community-wide survey to really ascertain what people currently are using, and based on trends and demographics, what we predict that they will be using in the next 10 to 20 years. So our facilities will reflect their use and the future use of this city. A bigger part of this master plan that is not normally considered is we really don't have an ADA plan element in relationship to the park and recreation facilities. And so we've broadened the scope of the RFP that we just did to make sure that we have, as part of this effort, a firm that will go out and access and assess the park and recreation facilities in regards to ADA improvements and what is needed. So we can start chipping away and making those improvements as we start addressing different park projects. So that's obviously a very significant component of this park and recreation master plan development. It is contributing to the dollar amount of this effort significantly. And that is the reason why I proposed in the steering committee that we have representation from this committee, if at all possible. We have also reached out to MCIL, and we have someone there that is also willing to be part of the steering committee, maybe as an alternate. It just depends on your involvement, but they would like to be involved as well. And honestly, we want to make sure that this area is well represented. As you can imagine, it's just important to be very inclusive as we start to address those needs. So the reason why I'm here today is to find out if there's somebody on the committee who would be interested in being part of that steering committee, what that entails, even though we're still selecting the consultant and we haven't firmed up the scope nor the timeline. I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen. We are going to choose a consultant in this next month. We are going to negotiate a fee, then go to the city council for an award. Probably by the end of the year or first part of January, we will have a kickoff with the steering committee. So everybody will understand their role and what the timeline and the scope is of this project. Most likely the steering committee will meet 6 to 8 times, I think, over the next, from January to probably June. They'll probably have a meeting per month. At this point, we expect it to be virtual. That might change as obviously COVID changes our world. But that's kind of what we're looking at, is for the involvement in the steering committee would help to guide the process. And as the consultants bring back feedback from all of the engagement and the assessments, that steering committee is going to help provide feedback and help to guide the process. So what we're looking for is somebody who would like to be representative of this committee, and possibility of an alternate. If there isn't 2 people that are interested, then we will ask MCIL to partner with the member of the steering committee. So you're well represented.
So
I'm
we
happy
have,
to answer any questions.
sure, Francine.
I'm glad I was able to make it today. So when you say meeting 6 to 8 times during that time period, how long are you anticipating the meetings to be? Would they be like an hour meeting, or would it be a 3 or 4 hour meeting? I mean, that's kind of a little vague.
Yeah, it is a little vague, and I'm sorry about that. Honestly, this is a pretty meaty process, and I don't know if any of you were involved in the general plan or the general plan meetings, but those meetings were pretty long because it's a pretty extensive project. I expect, based on my past experience, that the steering committee meetings will be about 2 hours
Right.
per meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So I can bring it back to the committee, seeing if there's any interest from our 5 members that we have here today. They're looking for I think a primary and a backup, correct, Susan?
Correct. That would be great.
I would be happy to, with the caveat that my background is in compliance law, not actual first person experience with disability. So
Right.
if that's what you're going for, I'd be happy to be the alternate, but I have the experience with compliance law and landscape architecture and parks
Yeah,
master
maybe
planning.
that's, you're a ringer. So that's a good thing. We love that. It's okay to have a lot of experience. We'd rather have a lot of pros. But I do want to share with you, this is not the only opportunity where the public will be able to provide feedback, especially people that really want to weigh in on ADA improvements and accessibility. We will make sure, and that's the whole reason why you're also here, is to make sure that you provide us feedback on, when we do that community engagement, who we should be reaching out to, so they have a voice and they have a way to participate, to really make sure we get that information.
I'm interested too, and I was going to say that I thought Ashley was more qualified than I am, but I am more qualified to speak about the experience of having a disability. So, if it turns out that I would be an alternate and still be there to speak, because that's what I am here. I'm an alternate here as well. I'm willing to jump into it.
Is there any other comments from the other members?
I'm also willing to, but I'm also, I am a volunteer committee member on the advocacy committee over at MCIL. So I'm wondering, I don't know if that's I don't think that's a conflict, but.
Well, you're going to have someone from MCIL as well, right?
Right.
So maybe you could be both. I mean, you know,
Uh,
be there along
Yeah,
with,
I'm only on the advocacy committee. They generally have board members on their other committees, and I'm just a volunteer over there, but I can talk to them about it. But I do have experience with my own disability at various levels over time, and I work with a lot of developmentally disabled adults, and many of whom also have a wide spectrum of physical disabilities. So and we do use the parks quite a bit at our program.
Well, my hope is that maybe the people we select can come back and update this committee and we can give them feedback. So everybody on this committee could kind of participate in that manner. And we can feed our information back through the alternate and the primary. Looks like we have 3 people that are interested. Is there any other, John or Diane?
I don't think I have time at this time.
Okay. So then time's another issue. I guess we could put it up to a vote, but there's only 5, 6 of us.
I don't
I
have
don't know.
any attachment. I'm just willing to jump in and I'm interested, you know, but if Tim wants to do it, that's fine with me.
Well, I have the length of meetings here. How often are they anticipated to be?
My guess is we're going to have about 6 to 8 steering committee meetings, and they will be about 2 hours each. The kickoff meeting most likely will be a half a day because they'll be going through the orientation, introducing the consultants, making sure that the steering committee is familiar with their charge, understanding the scope, and then we'll go from there. Dawn really said it really well just now, and I apologize for not saying the most obvious thing. The whole point of having a steering committee is that messaging. It goes, not only are you representing ADA committee, but you're taking the information from the Park and Rec steering committee and bringing it back. You really are that messenger. Also to make sure that as we do community engagement or we are forming focus groups, what groups should be invited to those focus groups, especially if we have a focus group on ADA. Is it MCIL? Is it this committee? Who else is it? You know, and that's where I'm going to look to you and your expertise to make sure that we do our due diligence and really cast a wide net. The worst thing that we could do is not hear from people. That's the worst thing, to finish this, spend all that money and have people show up going, I had no idea this was going on.
Right.
Then I should just be shot. So that's not good. So we want to make sure that whoever the representative is really feeling comfortable in that role of kind of going back and forth and making sure that we're doing the job that we should be doing.
So does that work for you, Tim, about 8 meetings, 2 hours, or?
No, yeah, over what span of time? And when are we talking about starting? We are temporarily in an incredible crunch here. I've lost half my management, filling a lot of shoes right now. But when is this? When are you looking at starting?
I'm assuming that there will either be a kickoff orientation meeting before the end of the year or in January. So my guess is it's going to probably be November, December, early December, obviously, or January.
That should work.
Yeah, and then from that point on, the steering committee will have meetings most likely every month until the project is completed. And then obviously everybody's invited back when the big presentation happens. Because once the steering committee finishes meeting, we're drafting the plan, we bring it back going, does this reflect what you all heard? Usually it's done by then, and then it goes forward through the presentation. So.
Okay, well, I'm absolutely willing and would love to serve as a messenger back and forth. I would probably have to run it past my executive director and see if she's okay with that outlay of time outside the organization.
Okay.
Assuming they're going to be weekday meetings.
So maybe I can make a proposal that we select Ashley as primary and Tim as secondary. If something should not work out with that permission, Tim, we'll look at Francine.
Okay.
If everybody's in agreement, if you kind of want to nod your head, or we will.
I will say, I will defer to Francine and Tim. I'm happy to serve and I'm interested in the project, but also I don't have that first person's perspective. So, and I think that is highly valuable. So If
So
you,
should I reverse it then? Have perhaps Ashley and the alternate, and we will have Tim as primary, and if that should not work, have Francine step in as primary. Is
I
that-
really, if I may, I don't think it really matters too much. I would always recommend that the representative and the alternate always attend the meetings.
Mhm.
Obviously, you can only, if there's a vote, there's rarely a vote, it's mainly feedback. But if that was that case, you have one vote, but it's always good for continuity that everybody goes to the meetings, because if Ashley, let's say, couldn't make a meeting, the other person is well-versed on what led to the meeting that they're now attending, instead of
Right.
going in cold and going based on the minutes and based on what I think I remember, where are we in this project? So that's never a good feeling for the alternate to walk in there kind of, cold. So I would highly recommend that.
And knowing Ashley and the other members here, I think everybody's pretty collaborative, so I think they would communicate whether they're alternate or primary with each other. So we can select Ashley as the alternate and Tim as a primary. And if there's something that does not work out, we'll have Francine step in. Is that good with everybody?
And I'm really interested in hearing about how it goes, but you'll be reporting back to this committee anyway. So,
Mhm.
right, that's great. And I particularly like that that Tim and Ashley have the kind of experience they do. I mean, mine is personal experience, and I know a lot of disabled people, but I haven't necessarily worked closely with agencies like Tim and Ashley have. So I'm happy with it being the way it is.
Sounds great. So we'll go with that. I don't know if we really, I don't think we really need to take a formal vote. I will just put it down as that's how we're going to go forward, and a recommendation from the committee from the chair. If there's anything else from Parks or Rec, or anything anybody want to add regarding, is it Parks and Rec or is it Parks and Library? I'm so sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right, Don. It is, the department that I represent is the Library and Recreation Department. The name of the project is the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So
Got it.
yeah, it gets a little confusing. The only thing that I'm going to need you to send me, and you don't need to do it today, obviously we're on Zoom, but if you could send me their contact information, because as we finish the slate, we're almost there. We almost have a full slate. I will be able to provide the steering committee with updates as far as when we're looking at schedule and times and all that good stuff.
Sounds good. And emails good enough for the initial contact?
Email is great as long as they respond to it.
They do.
Sure so that's fine. I mean, I can call people too. That's great. But it would be great if I can come up with a distribution list to keep everybody in the fold so no one's wondering what's going on.
Sounds great.
I just want to thank everybody. Not every committee is so willing to jump in and assist. And I'm really thankful, Dawn, for inviting me today, and thankful for all of you for being willing to raise your hand. I'm sure you do it often, but I really appreciate this. This is going to make a significant effort in the way of how the city proceeds with its improvements and how the community really engages and enjoys all of the parks and recreation facilities. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for coming in.
Bye.
So our next item is 4B, which is April from Public Works for an update. And I think they have a lot of exciting things going on. I see new sidewalks going in on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard.
Francisco East.
Oh, east. Sorry.
Yeah, there are some over there, but that's the county project.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Don, for having me today. Wasn't sure where to start. We have a lot of things going on in the city, so I'm just going to go over a few things, and then I was talking to my staff, and they're willing to even present on individual projects on different committee meetings and kind of go over more details. So I'm just going to do a quick interview. Review. So as you mentioned, so Francisco Boulevard East, that project is a federally funded project where we received funding to widen the sidewalk there to allow both bikes and pedestrians to use the sidewalk. Ideally, we would want it to be wider than we constructed it, but that's the maximum amount of right of way that we had in order to fit in a widened sidewalk and still provide the travel lanes. So the sidewalk is almost complete. There's a few patches out there that need to be fixed because we're switching the street lights out, but that job should be complete in the next month or month and a half. One of the reasons we're waiting also is because we're in a drought, so we don't want to plant trees. So we're waiting until the weather gets cooler to hopefully help the tree survival on that road. Another one of our projects that's currently in construction is the Canal Crosswalk project. And that's in East Santa Fe. There's 11 locations that were identified to have new curb ramps, enhanced crosswalks. Some of those are going to have the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And so it's spread out throughout the canal, and a couple of the locations are near Santa Fe High School. So currently, I'd say 90% of the concrete work is done. Right now, we're waiting to receive the poles so we can actually put in the flashing beacons. There's a delay with materials. So we're waiting for those to come in the next few months on that project. Then a couple of the projects we have that are just went out to bid is on Woodland Avenue and Bungalow Avenue. It started as a resurfacing project, and we combined with the sewer district was replacing their line, and it was a good opportunity for us to come in and resurface the road. And as everyone knows, when we resurface the road, we have to upgrade all the curb ramps. So we're going to be upgrading a bunch of the curb ramps in that area, as well as there's a little bit of a sidewalk gap closure on Bungalow for a couple 100 feet that we're going to close there. And then we received some information from the Safer Routes to Schools requesting a crosswalk at Woodland and Lavelle. So we're actually installing new curb ramps at that location and a new crosswalk there to improve the Safer Routes to Schools. Let's see. And then one of our big design projects that's going to go out to bid in the next couple months is the 3rd Street Rehabilitation Project. It's actually 2 projects. It's a rehabilitation project and a safety project. That's just based on the funding is how the names were determined. So that project is from the high school, Santa Fe High School, and it goes all the way down to the Miracle Mile, or just short of the Miracle Mile, so just short of 4th Street. And that project has a bunch of different improvements. We're going to be resurfacing that road and upgrading all of the curb ramps that are not accessible. But on 3rd Street, the cross slopes of the road are pretty steep. So when you're walking across 3rd Street, you're kind of going uphill and then back downhill. So in the downtown core intersections, there's 4 intersections where we're actually raising the asphalt there. So it's going to be, so as you're driving along 3rd Street, you'll kind of ramp up and you'll be level and you'll ramp back down. And that's going to help us with the cross slopes so that when pedestrians are crossing, they'll be flushed through there and the sidewalk, the entire road will be picked up. So I'm not sure if we're going to be completely under 5%, but it's going to be significantly better than it is today. So we're improving those key intersections where we have the most pedestrian crossings downtown. So that job is probably going to go start construction in the winter, and it's going to last about a year. So there's going to be a lot of chaos driving in that location, and even with pedestrians and just walking through there. Another item that I've kind of taken over in my role is the Sidewalk Program. So the Sidewalk Program, I'm not sure how much you guys know about it, but there's a residents can sign up, and there's a cost sharing with residents if there's uneven sidewalks in front of their homes or tripping hazards. The city will contribute a portion of our funds to help them repair the sidewalks. And so we started a couple years ago. People in Bristol Park signed up, and then Sun Valley, and then we ended up, right now we're in Peacock Gap, and we received so many people who've signed up. It started as a pilot program, but we have a contractor who's working as hard as he can, but we've actually decided we're going to temporarily put the project on hold so we can catch up with all of our liabilities, because we've received so many people who've inquired that we need to make sure that we get to everybody who's already identified. So right now we're working with the contractor to speed things up and to get to some people who signed up back in 2018 and make sure that their sidewalks are worked on. And then we're going to look at revamping the program to try to figure out how to expedite it and get more sidewalks complete and more of these uneven sidewalks taken care of. We've also paired with a company called Precision Concrete Cutting. They shave sidewalks to help kind of improve that there's not as big of a lip on them. And so they're going to go around and go to all the people who already signed up, because we're still probably a couple years out from getting everybody done in the program who signed up, just so we can take care of some of those hazards, or uneven surfaces and tripping hazards around town. And then we've also just kind of talking about the sidewalk program and different ways the city can, how can we help contribute to the sidewalks? We took $100,000 of our contingency for this year, and we're putting it towards remove and replace projects. And so since Freitas Parkway is one of the big streets that's actually all city responsibility, because none of the residents front Freitas Parkway, we've actually decided to go in and put our first remove and replace project is going to be improving some of the sidewalks through there. We've received a lot of complaints, and there's a senior housing facility there, and we want to make sure that they can, we're starting there and make sure they can get to the shopping center, and then we'll keep expanding. It's probably going to take us quite a few years to eventually get all of the sidewalks on Freitas Parkway, but we have to start somewhere. So, and then one more project that's going to go out to bid soon. Also, out on Spinnaker Drive, it's a parking modification project. So there's an old parcel that's not being used by the city, and so we're going to shift the road over to add diagonal parking instead of parallel parking. And since we're increasing so many parking stalls, we're actually adding 2 accessible parking stalls that will be closest to where you have access to the shoreline trail. So there will now be 2 accessible parking stalls now on that side, because the other side of where the parking is right by Pickleweed and AJ Borough, which there's 88 parking stalls within the lot. So if they're visiting there, they have accessible parking, but on the other end, we're adding in a few accessible parking stalls.
And I think you guys are also adding accessible parking on that 3rd Street improvement too, on street parking.
Yeah, there's a few locations where we're going to be adding some accessible parking stalls there too.
And that's under the California, I forget the standard that you guys are using.
Off the top of my head, I can't remember which one, but yeah. So we're gonna,
like a DOT standard or something for the accessible parking stalls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any questions. That's just a little bit of update. What's more current or going to happen soon?
Yeah, we'll start with Tim, and then we'll go to Francine.
I have one. Is the concrete shaving, is that cost shared as well, or is the city just running around and doing that?
The city's running around and doing that. That's something in the sidewalk program we said we would do as a benefit for the community. We have a certain amount of money we have each year, so we can do as much as we can up to that contract amount. Our maintenance division also has money separately, where they every other year they go between doing city-owned facilities like parks, and then also coming back and doing roads. So they have another pot of money. So we're trying to maximize the amount we can for the sidewalks.
And Francine, you had a question?
I have a couple actually. One is, when you say that the city will contribute a portion for repairs, is there a percentage on that, or does it vary from neighborhood to neighborhood? And then I have another question also.
Yeah, no, it's it's kind of complicated. So it's sort of 50-50. So if there's an improvement that needs to be done for accessibility, then we split it up to a certain dollar amount. But if a lot of residents want to replace all of their sidewalk because it'll look nicer, or they want to add more items, so then that's why it's not quite 50-50. It's just the improvements that need to be done, we contribute towards the sidewalk and the curb and gutter. And then if there needs to be a tree removed because it's the tree that's causing the problem, then the city will remove the tree, and then we'll replace the tree if the resident agrees to the maintenance of the tree.
I see.
That part's on us. So it's hard to do.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Just to comment before I give you this other question, it's kind of funny to me that Peacock Gap got in on this early, because it's not one of the oldest neighborhoods in San Rafael, and generally the oldest neighborhoods have the worst sidewalks. So in Loch Lomond, we have several buckled sidewalks, But from what I heard you say, what my understanding is that you have about a 2-year backlog, and that anybody that applied right now probably wouldn't see anything happening until late 2023 or so. Is that right?
Well, so we've actually, since it was a pilot program that was only supposed to go on for 2 years, we just received so many applicants that, and now it's been, I think, 4 years. So we received so many applicants that we had to close the pilot and figure out, okay, do we need more contractors? Like, how can we actually, keep up with this work? So we're trying to get done the people who've already signed up. And then we're just trying to work through it. I mean, this is pretty new, our trying to revamp how the program works to get more contractors interested in doing it. Because right now we only had one contractor who was willing to do the legwork to help us on it. So we're trying to figure out now. I mean, some of the people who are in the queue, we're looking at maybe even lumping them together and doing a separate contract with a different contractor just to try to get up to speed. Like we're trying to do everything we can at this point to figure out another way to.
So are you still accepting applications for, no?
Not right now. We just closed it about 2 weeks ago because we need to get ahead of it. We need to get ahead of it. And
Yeah,
I don't know the order that was picked on which neighborhood was selected first and
Right.
how that, or I'm not sure. I've just always been told kind of which way it went. So
Right, sure. It's just kind of ironic. And I mean, I'm just to give you an example, I use a lightweight scooter when I go for a walk. I can't go for walks. So, and there are lots of places in our neighborhood, which is considered kind of a Tony neighborhood out here in Loch Lomond, where I can't use the sidewalk. I have to go out in the street. And there are places where it's been repaired with asphalt, but it's still really dicey. And I don't know who repaired it with asphalt. It may have happened when PG&E did their tearing up the road on Lochinvar. But I know there's got to be other places in San Rafael, maybe downtown and other areas where the sidewalk is pretty much impassable, and you have to go out in the street if you have any kind of a power chair or wheelchair or whatever. So it's just ironic to me that it would be Peacock Gap that would get the first repairs, because that's a much newer neighborhood than most of the rest of these. I'm just commenting. It's just funny. So, but you're not taking applications. Do you know if there's any future thought of repairing sidewalks in other parts of San Rafael?
yeah, so the city ordinance is that the property owner is responsible for the sidewalks. So ultimately, if there's uneven sidewalks, the property owner. So the city's just trying to help facilitate to get most of them, to help get them fixed so that it's easier to get around town. So if there's these uneven ones, I guess it would ultimately go to the property owner. So that's where we're trying to get more people to sign up, or try to figure out a way to sign up. Sorry, I was receiving another call.
Yeah, I've always, since I've lived here for 18 years, and my understanding was that the property owners were always in charge of the sidewalks, and if you wanted them fixed, you had to do it yourself. So, you'd have to ask a neighbor, would you please fix your sidewalk? And they would think that it wasn't, there was, all that whole mucky muck. And to hear that there was actually a program whereby we could have split it to get these sidewalks fixed. I mean, I never heard that. It certainly wasn't anything that went out to the Loch Lomond neighborhood to tell us that we could get our sidewalks fixed and have a 50-50 split on the cost, because I think some people would have done it. But thank you. Thank you.
There will be a program that will come back. We want to be able to, if people sign up, we want to be able to finish it in that year. So we're trying to figure out a way on how many signups and
Sure, I respect that.
And I think sometimes when there's asphalt put on, if there's too much, if it's too uneven, then sometimes even our crews will put in some asphalt just so there's some sort of ramp until it's fixed.
That's probably what happened. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Public Works? Nope. Okay, so we'll have just a couple items left. Thank you so much, April. We appreciate you coming by, and hopefully we won't scare you off and you'll come back in December and give us a little update.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
And it's great hearing from Public Works. I appreciate it. Thank you. So our next item is the ADA coordinator report. I do not have anything to really report. I'm still talking to the post office, and I haven't been able to follow up since our last conversation. But that's on my ticker list here. And then we do have topics for our future topics, including the transition plan, the ADA parking for downtown, emergency preparedness, police, and postal access. I had a thought and I just lost it. Oh, the transition plan. We didn't get in the budget this year the replacement that we lost from last year, but we're working on it. And we're trying to get back that $80,000 to update our transition plan. The status is kind of murky at this point. The city was relying on some other monies that were coming in. Those monies are coming in, so perhaps we will get funded. I just don't have a really clear update on that part of the transition plan.
And the 80,000 was for education? Is that what that was? Or am I?
Two different things, same dollar amount, but two different
Oh.
things. One is we do have $80,000 for some sort of program to educate or promote downtown, or in fact, I'm working with economic development on coming out with a handout to encourage businesses to reopen in downtown and what they need to do to comply with ADA. And a lot of them approach it cautiously because they're not sure of the impacts or how much they're going to have to do. And in some cases, it's not something they should be afraid of. It's really pretty straightforward. So that's 180,000, but we do have that money. That money is designated and it's special, and we get that off of business licenses. I believe about $4 a business license. So we have about $80,000 sitting in that fund that we can use for those educational or outreach type programs. The other $80,000 I was talking about was money that we were originally funded last fiscal year, and then it was swept at the beginning of the pandemic or beginning of the fiscal year during the pandemic. That $80,000 was to hire a consultant to come in and update our transition plan. I guess the good news is it looks like a portion of that work may be done under the planning of Parks and Rec. And so that is a good thing. But we do have other buildings in the city that aren't under parks that we would need to update that transition plan and probably then put into capital projects with Public Works a plan on how to improve or make improvements to these buildings and sites and get those funded. But probably the first step is a transition plan. When I was looking at the binder I have here over on the shelf, we do have some facilities that no longer exist and new ones that aren't even in the book. So just getting an accurate list and going through. I've gone up to Falkirk several times. We used to have a lot of like weddings and public events up there, and the area is not very accessible. We have a lot of ramps, and just getting in and out and around the building is difficult. And so that would be one of those that they would have to look at. Some of the ADA improvements or accessibility improvements they've done in the past up there, which were huge at the time, they're just not very current for today. One of those is even truncated domes in high traffic areas. There isn't any. So that's just one example. City Hall has some other issues. We often get complaints about our handrails that go up and down our stairs. We also have some transition issues into the parking lot that probably should be addressed. Some of these are known by Public Works and they're hoping to get them on the capital projects, but they don't make there's so little money, they don't make it on the very far on the list. So the idea was maybe with the transition plan can kind of push them more. to get some of those completed. And then we also have some over at the library, the main library. And it's just things that need to be addressed. And I'm thinking a transition plan might be the best way to identify that and address it. But that comes with a cost. So. Any other questions on that? Any information the group wants to share? If not, our next meeting is the first Wednesday of December, which is December 1st at 2 p.m. And we'll probably, I'm hoping we're kind of getting in a routine with parks and public works that they'll be coming to our meetings. So that might be good. And I'll try to see if they can't get you some visuals. I know when they were describing on 3rd Street, I know they have some photographs and architectural simulations of those intersections that she's talking about, which might be really good for you to take a look at to see what they're looking at. I know one of the potential issues is it's a smooth transition from the sidewalk to the parking or to the crosswalk. And there's not really any curb or even really a curb ramp. It's kind of a blended transition, which is great. But the bad thing about that is cars that are making turns can kind of cut that turn tight.
Got it, yeah.
And I think they're planning on using some bollards and some landscaping to try to protect the pedestrians, which wasn't in their first revision of the drawings or first version of the drawings, but it is in the revision. So maybe that would be helpful for you to look at. I also would like to kind of maybe see if they can provide us a plan of what they're talking about out in Terra Linda on that street and what areas they're planning on repairing and replacing. Because I think there are some areas that have no sidewalks at all
Yeah.
that are
Greatest part.
It's hard to call them sidewalks because there's like an immediate drop off into like a ditch.
Yeah, and we get complaints from both drivers who are upset that people are in the drive lane with their wheelchair because there's no other path for them. And then we also get complaints that people are upset that there's no other path for them.
Yeah.
So we need to try and maybe pick the high volume areas and see if we can't get that resolved. I think we even have a crosswalk. I think it's a new improvement out there, but it really goes nowhere. We get across the street, but there's nowhere to go from there. So we have this great crosswalk with all the bells and whistles, but it doesn't really build past that very far. So, well, if that's it, I will go ahead and call the meeting at 2:56 and we'll see everybody in December. And I hope everybody's safe. It will be another Zoom meeting. I think at our last meeting, we discussed about continuing these Zoom meetings through the end of the year. So in December, we will have a discussion as if we want to go to a hybrid format, probably for our, I guess it would be our March meeting. Or if we want to go in person, or if we want to continue with Zoom, I'm open to any of those. There's kind of pros and cons to each one of those, but we can discuss that in December. If that's it, I will close the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
See you
you.
all.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.